sales training has become somewhat of an afterthought. Most corporations are going to hire what we call a retread or an existing sales talent from another organization.
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to the Salesman Podcast Live in partnership with HubSpot and recorded at the Leadership Summit down in amazing Chicago. On this episode we have Howard Doerr. He is the Director of the Center of Professional Sales over at the University of Texas, Dallas. I had to read that one out. There's no way that I was going to remember that title. And we had a really fascinating conversation about the academic side of sales, how that is going to change the sales industry moving forward, and how it can perhaps get rid of that negative stereotype that salespeople have over time. Everything that we talk about in this episode is available and linked to in the show notes over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with all that said, let's jump into today's episode. Howard, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you on. We're going to take a different tact on the usual very practical episodes that we do. And on today's show, I guess we'll start with the end in mind of I want to build the audience into a whole bunch of advocates that are going to go and sing the praises of both sales professionalism, of being a sales professional, and then how we can add to that and pile it on with, I guess, the academia and the academic side of things as well. So I'm going to ask you this super leaded question. I know exactly where we're going to go with all this, but we've got to start somewhere, and that is, across the US, the UK, everywhere else, should there be more programs within universities, schools, colleges, to talk about sales and sales skills specifically?
Yeah, I think that's the big challenge in academia today and business school. And in the United States, there's definitely a drumbeat. Definitely the Wall Street Journal has been pounding the business schools in the United States a lot right now about the irrelevancy of our educational system. And I think this is where sales programs inside of business schools absolutely bridge that gap. So the answer is yes. Right now there's 42 recognized sales centers in the United States. I think there's one in the UK. Actually, it may be in Austria, actually. And then the Sales Education Foundation says there's about 150 to 200 programs globally that are trying to structure a curriculum. But this is out of the thousands of universities out there. So, yeah, I think it needs to continue to grow. And I think part of it is the misperception of what sales is.
So we'll come on to that in a second, because clearly, for anyone who listens regularly will know that that negative stereotype is something that I'm looking to leverage our audience to act professionally to get rid of that. And clearly my audience are B2B sales professionals versus the horrible stereotype of the used car salesperson. But just going back to this, and there might be a history, there might be a reason why, I'm not sure, but sales is the oldest or the second oldest profession, depending on how you want to rank things. Why isn't there a history of sales being taught to universities when things like English, psychology, I don't know, there's lots of degrees, I don't know about so much in the US, but in the UK, a lot of people go to university, do any old degree just because they want the experience of going to university versus they're looking at the job at the end of it. Why isn't there more, or why has it been slower to have been adopted by universities to have a protocol and an implementation of sales?
Well, I think if you want to look at its root cause, communications has always been taught. Psychology, the basis of why we buy and why we sell, is based in psychology. So I guess the counter argument would be that the theoretical underpinnings of what sales is have been taught for years. It's just that a lot of academic institutions feel that the second we move from a theoretical base into a practitioner space, we diminish the educational experience. So I think that's the argument I'm told a lot.
That's interesting, because I guess you can split it both ways. Of if you are studying medicine, so my girlfriend's a doctor, that's all practical.
That's right. Well,
there's obviously underlying elements of why things need to be done, but if you're operating on someone, you probably want to know less theory and more actionable insights, and when things go wrong, what you should be doing, the step-by-step process. And clearly sales, I guess it straddles both sides of things. Of if you know the psychology behind it all, you can perhaps in the moment make better. No, I'm going to take that back, because if you know the step-by-step process, if you know you've got the experience to use your gut to change the conversation and to adapt the conversation and to better communicate, perhaps you don't need to know the evolutionary psychology of why it all works. So I guess sales comes in both sides, right?
I think it does, and I think also I'm an economist by training, so I think actually economics is a fascinating study of why decisions are made. So I think the question is, can we move from the baseline to the applied, and the answer is yes. So, and what is the value there? And I had a student of mine whose parent is a doctor, and she wanted her to go straight from her undergrad in sales, where she actually got a mechanical engineering degree and took a couple of sales classes, and immediately was the belle of the ball, the
Really?
darling of the ball, and everybody wanted to hire her because here she's an engineer who can sell. And her mom said, "Well, I want you to go straight into the MBA without any experience." I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Your mom, when she was a doctor, she had to do her practitioner work. She had to do her rounds in the hospital before they allowed her to be a doctor and before they allowed her to specialize." I said, in our world, as a salesperson, you need to go out and you need to learn a little bit more before you go into these advanced degrees so that you actually understand and have context. And I think that's where the opportunity even arises in advanced degrees within sales, which that absolutely is an area that there's just so few programs with master's level education. Our university has a curriculum. Florida State has a curriculum. There's a few universities in the country, like University of Houston, but it's probably less than a dozen that have a
You just
graduate
touched on
degree.
something here, and sorry to dive in, but I'm excited about this. In that I never considered this before. Of if you are doing a degree in mechanical engineering, or for me, my background is medical devices. So if I knew I wanted to go into that and have a career in it, perhaps I wouldn't necessarily want to do just a master's in sales. I could do something along the lines of a degree in nursing with sales tacked on the side of it.
That's correct.
And you'd be crazy employable in the medical device world.
We call them unicorns. If we can get a technical, we have electrical engineers, we have nursing, we have a neurosciences student right now taking sales classes. And we have a certification where you only take 4 classes, but you stay in your own degree. Now, we're unique that way due to the programs we have. These people come out fully trained in a very technical space, but then they're fully ready to sell in the technical space. And like I said, they're the happiest offers. They're the most valuable students we have in our program,
And
technical and selling.
Because I want to dive into this even more, in more detail. So my background, I've got a degree in chemistry.
Yes.
My first role out of that was selling chemical catalyst to the pharmaceutical industry.
Fascinating.
So all the way through university.
And you were fully trained, of course.
Well, I was a trained chemist, but my
to
sales
sell, right?
experience was through running a small company that paid me for university.
Okay.
So it was entrepreneurship experience versus sales experience. But if I'd have gone into that interview having the chemical knowledge to be able to talk about the products without any extra training, or minimal extra training on the back of it, and had, even better if I'd done an internship in a sales role, they would have eaten me up. Because my unique selling point when I went into that interview, and I remember it really vividly, because there was a bunch of people outside, and they must have all called us in, over a 2 or 3 hour period, and people were going back and forth. So you got to eye up the competition, and a lot of the people there had just done this degree in chemistry. And talking about stereotypes, there's a stereotype of someone who's done a degree in chemistry and they're a huge nerd, perhaps less and socially awkward, however you want to describe it. And clearly it's a stereotype, but I know from all my lectures, I was definitely a different breed to everyone else who was doing the degree, who were going to spend time in labs and do that side of it professionally. So at the interview, I knew I had an edge. I knew I had the entrepreneurship angle. I'd had some really cool adverts printed up in a couple of basketball magazines in the UK, and so I'd done all these bits extra and beyond that I assumed other people would. So I got the job. But again, I'm getting excited. I'm smiling as I'm saying it. Of if I had done that degree, had that sales background, I would have probably got even hired on a less junior role, and I would have got ahead of myself and started a few steps ahead as well.
That's usually what happens. Is I had a major thought leadership company come to Dallas for one of our events, and it was, I won't say his name because I don't have his permission to share the private conversation, but he's known as a thought leader and trainer, and he's a best-selling author that lots of people use. And he came just to see what we were doing.
Yeah.
And at the end of that process, where we had a 2-day event where this was our midterm, the midterm, right? we don't have tests. We have sales exercises. So the students actually had to put up booths like we're seeing here at this event, and they were the booth. They had to sell themselves as the product for 3 hours. Then they had to have an introductory sales meeting. They had to do social selling before the event, and their social selling index score from Sales Navigator and LinkedIn was part of their grade. And then we got into the finals. Only 6 students made it to the final day with their sales, and we had a horrible scenario. They were going to upsell from 100 units to 360 units, the Navigator product from LinkedIn, and the person decides to cut the contract. In fact, they come in on a meeting where the guy comes in and says, hey, the consensus from the committee is let's cancel the whole deal. None of us are using the product. And the student had to then save the existing contracts and build in 20 minutes. And the guy that came in from Washington, D.C., he said I don't know what I thought you did. He said, I knew you did stop. I knew you made them sell. He said, but he said, that was brutal. He said, to watch these students walk into I'm going to take the existing contract off the table. I want a refund for all the use I didn't get. And by the way, try to close me on an upsell. And he said, and they did it. And he said, then this was the interesting thing. He said, your students wouldn't fit in my program the way it exists. I'd have to elevate them. He said, we have a 7-step process to get promoted. He said, we'd have to change the way we do things because we'd have to bring them in on the 6th or 7th slot because they're already far advanced because you've already taught them the early stages that we feel we have to teach. So they do get a leg up. They are more powerful. They are more adept, and they're ready to be coached because we've been coaching them for 2 years before you get them.
And just to double down on this, Howard, in that you're teaching them to sell on their time versus they're wasting one company time. And I know when I first got medical device sales, I burnt through a load of customers because I had no idea what I was doing. And clearly, you work then to bring them back on board, but you're not ruining customer time as well, which is something I see with new sales reps all the time. I'll get an email from the audience of, essentially, I've just spammed half the industry. I didn't realize I was doing it wrong until I got no replies. But now, the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies have got this email from me, and they've got this negative taste in my mouth. And so it's one internally for that individual salesperson that the personal brand and everything comes into it then, and that's been negatively affected. But then for the organization who are hiring, if every time they bring on a new rep, they burn 5% of the potential decision makers that they're going to be in front of, that's not sustainable over the long term either, is it?
It's a huge issue. And I think one of my advisory board members constantly tells his salespeople, he says, you're not allowed to practice on my customers. You practice at home. And we try to emphasize that to our students. The time to get ready for the sale is prior to the sale. And
it sounds so basic when you say it, but it happens all the time.
Well, as you point out, the challenge that we have in sales today is that we got rid of training, at least in the U.S. market. I don't know about the U.K. market. Sales training has become somewhat of an afterthought. Most corporations are going to hire what we call a retread or an existing sales talent from another organization. Very few companies actually have their own training culture to take you from no experience to ready to hit the ground. And so they expect you to figure it out on your own. So that's dangerous. And by the way, you have a quota to carry. You have all this information to learn. And you've got to figure out how to develop value propositions, customer journey thinking, all on your own. And yet you don't even know what all that means. So our students walk in to like an IBM sales school or to go into Hewlett-Packard sales school, and they go, oh, I've already done this. Okay, so there's the context. I already know how to do the sales call. I already understand the customer journey. I already understand the pain points. I understand, okay, here's the major areas where they're probably going to object to me. And by the way, let me frame this in a way that, okay, let me think about how the questions, and the other person who didn't, like you, who is a chemical, right, student, walks in, we're in the same class together. I'm writing notes about how to strategically do my role play tomorrow, and you're saying, what's a role play?
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference. They get more they accomplish more, they onboard faster, and they produce higher. It's exciting. It's a fun thing. We like to say we change people's lives and trajectory.
Because
So
I bet when you've got them in a university setting, they're way more malleable than if you're currently carrying a quota and you've got to feed your family.
yes,
So you've got the opportunity to get best practices into them and drilled in, and perhaps even long-term thinking and things like this, versus I've got to close every deal, I've got to close the next one, which is, my experience and a lot of other salespeople that in the audience who come back and forth with me of, I would love to implement the challenger sale. I'd love to implement like relationship selling over the longer term and not be so needy for deals, but I can't commit to it because I'll miss target in the next 6 months and I'll get fired. So it seems like there's double the tangible benefits of it all are double, because again, I don't know if that's the correct word or the best word, but I know when I was at university, I was way more open to hearing different ways of going about things versus when I was in my sales role, I was just focused on that target.
there's just so much we get to do to tool them up. So not only is it just skills and understanding, we also use Salesforce.com. They actually have to do 2 to 3 projects with Salesforce.com. We're using Sales Navigator. We're using Time Trade and like Calendly to set up times. So they're becoming sales stack aware and technology enabled, and learning how to do the meeting. And coming back to your point, when I get a failure in my program, it's not going to change what they eat tomorrow. I can sit down with somebody and say, well, the good news is you're still in my program and you failed.
Yeah.
And we can look at your videos and we can look at your tendencies.
Even just that, just being able to look at stuff without the burden of a sales manager who can sack you. It's a whole different dynamic. I love this.
So we definitely say, some people get into our program and I like to consider that we have access to a freeway where you can go 80 miles an hour in the United States. In Texas, we have frontage roads. So you can stay on that frontage road for a long time in a city and never get on the freeway. And there's stop signs and there's stop lights, and you can only go about 30, 40 miles an hour on that. So we consider the sales program that we have, you can get right up on the freeway and go 80 miles an hour if you're ready. If you're not ready, you can stay on the frontage road for a long time till you're ready to get up on the freeway. And so we're able to identify, we use 25 different dimensions of skill. We definitely look at different skills and attributes, and they know where they're strong, they know where they're weak, and they develop it over a year or two, and they head out better equipped. Then they don't take a job that necessarily emphasizes my weakness, or I'm honest about it, right?
Yep.
That I need to fill my gaps in those spaces. So they can fail with us. And some of them actually decide that sales may not be for them, or sales support and enablement and training may be a better place to go, or marketing, smarketing, the new area of smarketing, right? Where your marketing that's supporting sales is maybe the better place for them.
So how do we then, Howard? How do we go about legitimizing sales as a whole and getting rid of this negative stereotype? And I'm talking specifically for the audience here. Should they be, as perhaps someone who's been selling for 1, 5, 10 years, be going back to university, and rather than doing an MBA, doing some kind of sales qualification or degree, or a master's, however it's framed up? Is that the solution, or what is the solution? I genuinely don't know.
I think organizations like AAISP, where we're at, are elevating the profession. I think that the Sales Management Association is elevating the profession. So the Sales Enablement Society was founded this last year in the United States, and it's becoming a global phenomena. I think getting engaged in society associations, right now that's where the thought leadership is spawning from. Coming to events like this at the Leadership Summit of AAISP, or Dreamforce at Salesforce, what a great place. They have a sales summit embedded. Just go and learn. There's a lot of movement in this space that's elevating the profession. And those that aren't elevating the way they do business are probably doing it in a way that is causing the very dilemma you just described. And that is that we feel it's not a good profession. It has a bad taste.
Let me ask you this then. So I get people ask me all the time, through email, because somehow hopefully the content's great. Maybe I'm over humbling here, but we've got a pretty big audience now. Of last month nearly 600,000 downloads of the show. So there's substantial groups of salespeople listening to this. So there's the potential in a couple of years for the audience to be that big to actually, a couple of episodes to really spark a fire and make a difference. Hopefully, anyway, that's my goal of all of this. But if they're in a role now, is this the differentiator of whether they are doing things the right way or the wrong way, of if they feel good or bad about what they're doing? And if they're feeling bad about what they're doing, is this a good enough reason that they should perhaps stay in sales, but change the career, change the company, and work for... What I'm getting at is, should we feel good about being sales professionals? Should we be excited to share with people that I am a B2B sales professional? Is that something that should be the norm, rather than it seems like that is, there's very few people in the industry that are proud to say that?
Well, I think the profession of sales is elevating right now. And I think the way in which we sell, including the way we prospect, the way we add value, the way we communicate with the customer, the way we engage with the customer, is changing the landscape so quickly that whatever you think you're doing today will not be around in 3 to 4 years. In fact, when I started the program at University of Texas at Dallas 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I taught sales very differently than I do today.
What's changed? What's the biggest change?
Understanding the customer journey. Challenger is a big issue of this. Yeah. Understanding that buyers are buying differently. They're more aware. They're not picking up their phones. They're not responding to emails, but they still need solutions to their problems, but they don't always know they have a problem. So that's where Challenger kind of comes in to say, you got to understand where on the journey the customer's at. Are they ready to buy? Are they thinking about buying, or do they not even know they have a problem? Well, the way we would message in all three of those situations is very, very different. And I think more and more people are making their own decisions, and you've got to be able to add value.
Yep.
And so you have to be a professional in today's world. You have to have more intelligence. You have to have more business acumen, more consultative ability, more ability to justify the return on investment. And so I think at the end of the day, I get up every day and I know that I make a difference in the world, and I'm a sales guy. I change companies' trajectories, and I change young people's lives by tying them with great companies that are changing trajectory. I don't work a day in my life. I get up and I change the world. I think salespeople, if they really understand what they're doing and they're working for great companies that are evolving and transforming, they're going to feel great every day.
I love it. I kind of led you down this route a little bit at the beginning of the interview, but we've kind of flowed there and arrived at where I wanted to arrive, which is what you just said is really empowering. There's going to be a huge chunk of the audience now, like 10, 50,000 people that go, yeah, I should feel good about what I'm doing. I'm making a positive difference. There's going to be a smaller minority that go, maybe I'm not making a difference, and maybe I'm manipulating, scamming, and just after the commissions at the end of the day. And I totally echo what you're saying. You clearly got data and thought about this, versus it's a gut feeling for me that those roles are just going to be engineered out by the buyer versus kind of anything that we can do as sales professionals.
Yeah, I think the ability to, don't get me wrong, cold calling, I love the debate of cold calling is dead, and Trish Bertuzzi got on and said, "God, I hate this debate because it's so old." And my good friend Brian Flanagan from Ziegler Corporation said, "Hey, let me tell you something." He said, "I've been teaching sales since the 70s. Cold calling has always been dead. It's called prospecting. Nobody wants to do it." So the challenge is that we still need to message, and we still need to engage people who don't know why they need what we have.
Yep.
But buyers are changing the way they're willing to receive that message. And they're changing who they're willing to do business with. So what works is shifting. And so I think if you look at there's a Forrester report out that says by 2020, we're going to have a 25% reduction in headcount. That's a U.S. number. 33% of that is going to be in what's called the low-hanging fruit space. There's going to be a 15% addition in those complex, problem-solving, consultative, add-value spaces. And how do we prepare people for that? That's been the number one challenge that I've been looking at over the last couple of years. And even though I feel I'm at the bleeding edge of education and sales at universities, I feel I'm woefully behind of where I need to be. And so we're working with a consortium of other universities right now in the US to try to design a sales curriculum for 2020. And it's to be honest with you, it's baffling. We're listening upstairs with one of my colleagues and we're writing down how we have to shape the whole way we talk. How do we have to retrain everybody and get them to think from the buyer's perspective? Because in the past, the seller controlled the environment. Now the buyer controls the environment. And if you try to do things that used to work even 2 years ago, it's getting less and less and less effective. And yet, things like social selling, if you just provide value to the customer in a way that they recognize that you know what you're talking about, they will jump into your pool. They will jump. We have students this semester we just put social selling in our curriculum. We have a student who's almost 500% of quota. We've never had that before. She's also our number one social seller. It's because people realize that she's telling a story for the customer journey, right? She's talking to the people who don't know what we do and saying, hey, this is what we do. Then she's talking to the people about why you should care, which is, by the way, you get more productivity when you hire a sales person from a university. And then she's talking to the people who need people today. And she's processed content and messaging. And then all of her student friends have actually amplified it, and they're blowing up their numbers.
Love it. Well, we'll have you back on for another future show, and I'd love to do the topic of what you think would be in the curriculum of a 2020 sales degree or something along those lines.
How about fall? Fall will have a vision. We're working all summer on this. It's going to be great.
We'll do it. I think that, well, one, it's a plug and promo for everything that you're doing, but I think that'd be a really fascinating conversation to have. I like to get the audience to look ahead of where things are moving, and clearly there's benefits to being the first using those tools, techniques. I hate techniques is the wrong word, but leveraging those conversations and those relationships that perhaps will work for everyone then, but the first people in always get the biggest percentage of all that. And with that, Howard, I've got one final question.
Okay.
Something that I ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Don't be ignorant. I think the danger in life is that we think we know and we don't know. So I think realize if you stand in a position to say, I probably don't know enough. My mind is confined to my experience and the world is moving around me. When I was younger, I was very ignorant and thought I knew a lot. Now I got my PhD and realize I know very little. And I think that's powerful. I think to say that this world that's shaping around us is billions of people making decisions with technology coming at us, with innovation coming at us, and we're changing the way we do everything. Whenever I meet a sales leader and says, I've got it all figured out, I know I'm talking to somebody I want to run away from. When I sit down and talk to a sales leader who says, man, I'm really trying to figure this out, we tend to be very, very good friends, because I think what has moved our program to where it is that I have people who tell me they don't know where they're going and they want me to help them and their peers understand where we're headed, how to prepare, and how to strategically go after revenue generation, which is the business we're in. We're in the business of generating revenue for the customers and ourselves. And if we do that, we get paid well, right?
Makes total sense. Well, with that, Howard, for everyone who's super excited now, because I'm feeling pumped up and motivated, you've got me excited about being involved in this world of sales. For everyone who's feeling the same, where can we find out more about you and everything you're doing as well?
Well, the best thing, if you want to follow us, everything that we put out is hashtag UTD sales. And that's not just me, but also all my other students. So that's the best place. Hashtag UTD sales.
Amazing
LinkedIn
stuff.
is probably I'm the most active on LinkedIn, a little bit of a Twitter presence. But
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Howard, I want to thank you again for your time, your insights, and for joining us on the show.
You bet. Thank you.